Hey, Jules Blessed Vegan, and as always, welcome to my channel. And for those of you who are new, I know you can benefit. So, of course, we're talking Joyful June, and I have a secondary topic about the devil not being in the details. What? I know. It's a little confusing, but I'll get back to that for those of you who are sticking around. But for those who are just doing Joyful June, today was to interject something happy, something positive in the conversations that you engaged in. And there's still plenty of time if you haven't. I was mostly with my husband, but I did see some civilians and I was able to be very positive. And even online, in what often becomes argumentative, and I have an uncanny ability to engage in those conversations, I was still able to do positive. So it was say something positive in the conversations that you engaged in today. And for tomorrow, again, completely free, it is to make a plan with friends to do something fun together. And I don't know what that's going to look like for you because you may still be in the quarantine. It's a new wave of COVID. You might want to be protecting yourself. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be together in person, but you can certainly do Zoom or Skype or just a great phone call. And you could even, one thing that my mother does, which I just love so much, is she's in an art group and they actually paint and sculpt and everything online. So they all have their cameras and they're all sitting there talking and doing their artwork for 3 hours. And, they're just super engaged and the cameras just melt away and they feel like they're completely present. So you can do something fun. Make a plan with friends to do something fun together. I love that idea. And again, completely free, which is also fabulous. So one moment, please, because I am attempting to locate my article. I'll go in this direction instead. And of course, I will include this in the description of the video because that's how I roll. And this is actually titled, "The Devil is Not in the Details, Fighting Temptation with Specific Truth." Gotta love that idea. All right, and of course, let's get through this right away. Because I often say I can hear the devil giggling as I falter, whatever it is, with my food, with whatever it is I'm doing. And I don't like to give the devil credit, but I know that he does enjoy watching me be not only tempted, but fall prey to whatever it is. So this is a great article. It says the power of temptation lies in the impression it makes on us. This statement is true in two senses. One, the power of temptation resides in the impression it makes on us. And two, the power of temptation deceives in the impression it makes on us. In saying that temptation's powers lies in the impression it makes on us, I'm referring to the very moment of temptation when we recognize and feel its luring appeal. And I often say that God gives me a 3-second window before things come falling out of my mouth. Especially less than lovely things. I have about 3 seconds of grace to choose not to go in that direction. Sadly, too often I just override and keep going. But I totally get that. The moment of temptation when we recognize and feel its luring appeal. I get that when there's some food, and food is a downfall for me, that I am tempted to eat. There is a moment where I know I am choosing to fall prey. So it says, but deceitful impressions only have alluring appeal to the degree that we already have a vulnerable disposition to a sinful desire. Of course, if it wasn't already something innately in our being that is drawn to that temptation, there would be no lure or appeal, right? And you know that to be true anyway, because often you have a friend who's just like, ugh. In fact, if I think of my husband and myself, I am totally a sugar girl. He's salty. He'll eat salt carbs all day, and I just want sugar. I mean, it doesn't appeal to him. And certainly salty things don't appeal to me. Heat? Now that's another story. Okay. So it says, but each person, and this is from the Bible, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And that's from James chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. So powerful. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And again, the desire varies person to person. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. No doubt. So when it's been acted upon, it gives birth to sin. And again, for sin, that is simply just outside God's grace. Whatever strength he gives you that you've overridden in that moment, right? To be outside of that grace is to sin. It says, then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And then this is so important. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And that is as simple as saying, I had a moment to eat completely healthy vegan, raw fruit and vegetables, and I went with vegan junk food instead, and all that luscious health and God's natural bounty was suddenly murdered by all the junk that my body now has to process. So I get that. Brings forth death, and that's James 1:14-15. Okay, the devil can't make us sin. Hear that again. The devil can't make us sin. He can only appeal, and man, isn't he talented that way? He can only appeal to our propensity to desire sinful things. So whatever the challenges that already rest within us, he can't make us act on it, but he can make it so dang appealing, right? So in a moment of temptation, we are fighting on two fronts. We need to resist the devil, and again, that's James chapter 4, verse 7, and we need to resist our desires. This is why the way of escape from temptation to sin often is to employ a healthy dose of realism and truth in advertising to it, not accepting the tempting impression at face value. In our fight, then, truthful clarity is premium. Let's read that sentence again. This is why the way of escape from temptation to sin often is to employ a healthy dose of realism and truth in advertising to it, not accepting the tempting impression at face value. In our fight, then, truthful clarity is premium. I love that. And these are the three subtitles. Number 1, diabolical impressionist. That is just a brilliant statement in itself. Diabolical impressionist. The devil is not an artist, but a vandal. He doesn't create. He distorts, disfigures, and defaces what God makes. Oh my gosh. Word. I mean, are you kidding me? The devil is not an artist, but a vandal. He doesn't create. He distorts, disfigures, and disfaces what God makes. Brilliant. But if satanic temptation were to be an art form, we might call it some twisted sort of impressionism. I so agree. In painting, impressionism is an approach where an artist's goal isn't to portray his... One moment, please. Let me remember that joyful June part while I'm reprimanding my dogs. Oh my gosh. All right. I'm blessed and calm. Okay, so in painting, impressionism is an approach where an artist's goal isn't to portray his objects as realistically as possible, but rather to use color, lighting, and typically less defined lines in order to evoke certain visual and emotional sensations, impressions, in a viewer. Think Claude Monet's Bridge Over a Pond of Water Lilies, or Woman with a Parasol. So yes, it can be a powerful and beautiful style. But, so important, when applied to temptation, diabolical impressionism becomes powerful and terrible. The devil doesn't employ realism when painting a temptation because there is no truth in him. And that's from John chapter 8, verse 44. The devil doesn't employ realism when painting a temptation because there is no truth in him. His goal is to use the spiritual equivalence. Spiritual equivalence. Okay, so it's just recognizable, almost from God, right? The spiritual equivalence of color, lighting, and less defined lines to evoke certain sinful emotional sensations. The power is in the momentary emotional impression it makes on the viewer. The devil doesn't want us to see the real thing. He just wants us to experience a rather vague impression that yielding to the temptation will bring happiness. Can you believe how brilliant that is? That is spot on. The devil doesn't want us to see the real thing. He just wants us to experience a rather vague impression that yielding to the temptation will bring happiness. Oh, that's so true. Okay, so here's the diabolical marketeer. He is like an amazing marketer. But since the devil is not an artist, we could make another analogy that might be more accurate and think of him as an evil marketeer. Marketing itself, of course, is not evil. At its most basic meaning, marketing is simply bringing a product to market. Think of an open-air market where merchants are competing for customers and are trying to make their booths and products and prices attractive. There's nothing wrong with this, provided that the merchants are truthful about their products. However, we live in an age of very sophisticated marketing, a fair amount of which is manipulative and misleading. Such marketeers make diligent study of the human psychology in order to understand the subtleties of human motivation and behavior. Then they use this knowledge in order to create advertising communications designed to entice people to purchase their products by appealing to powerful human appetites and desires and aspirations and fantasies, which often have no necessary connection to the products themselves. Guys, and that's so true. Like in recent years, I don't even know what a commercial is. People will say, so what were they selling in that commercial? What do I know? They were showing some women's bust and high heels, and it was a gum commercial. I mean, I don't even know. They were showing this fast car with sexy lines, and it was baby food. I mean, like, seriously, who even knows anymore? So it says they use temptation tactics, creative, deceptive impressions on people in order to manipulate their behavior in ways that benefit the marketeers. Who doesn't agree with that? So, no surprise, this is precisely what the devil does. And no one is more effective of a manipulative marketeer than the devil. In this sense, power is in the deceptive impression the temptation has on us. The devil does not want us to ask too many questions about the actual sin product and whether it can or ever has delivered the happiness it promises. He just wants the impression that it'll deliver in order to tap into our influential sinful desires and encourage us to be impulse buyers. Do you so get that? Oh my gosh, I so get that. Let me go back. The devil does not want us to ask too many questions about the actual sin product and whether it can or ever has delivered the happiness it promises. He just wants the impression that it will deliver in order to tap into our influential sinful desires and to encourage us to be impulse buyers. I love this article because it's so right on. It makes so much sense to me. Okay, finally, way of escape. Tapping into sinful cravings we already are vulnerable to, the power of temptation lies in the impression it makes on us. It lies in its immediate, compelling sensory nature, and it lies in its potently deceptive nature. In certain colors, in certain light, and in a kind of undefined way, it gives us the impression it has the power to make us happy. And in vague yet strongly asserted ways, it impresses us with promises to make us happy. And here is God's promise to us regarding every temptation. Are you ready? Of course, it's from the Bible. Bring it in, everybody. Take a moment. Here comes the Father speaking directly to you. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. 1 Corinthians 10:13. Verse 10, line 13. Let's go back. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man, meaning you're not the first one to ever experience this. Stop freaking out. It's just by virtue of being human. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. It's hard to believe at times, but I trust it. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, how to overcome it, how to be cleaned, how to be renewed, that you may be able to endure it. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. Okay, sometimes flight is the best escape from temptation. You got to love that, and it's underlined. We usually know which temptations we ought not to sit and reason with in the tempting moment. You're not kidding. But many times, flight is not an option, or it's not the best strategy or long-term solution to repeated temptations. In many cases, the escape God provides us is to treat Satan and our indwelling sin the same way we are to treat any other distorters of the gospel. Okay, get that word right. Distorters, those who take it and manipulate it in their own favor. Okay, so let's go back. In many cases, the escape God provides us is to treat Satan and our indwelling sin the same way we are to treat any other distorters of the gospel. 2, take every thought captive to obey Christ. And that's from 2 Corinthians 10:5. So in a tempting moment, this typically looks like pressing the enticing impression into the clarity of truth. What precisely is being promised to us? What does God have to say? And who do we wish to trust and why? This is essentially how Jesus resisted the tempting mirage moments Satan placed before him in the wilderness, which is Luke chapter 4, verses 1 through 13. And that's, of course, when Satan ridiculously promised him that he would turn rocks into bread knowing Jesus was starving, that he would give him all of the kingdoms of the world, which already belonged to Jesus, right? I mean, like on and on. So let's go back. So it says, take every thought captive to obey Christ. We actually have to stop and assess. And like I said, in that 3 seconds of grace, and certainly in those moments when I know the temptation is coming, if I dare to pause, if I say what Tanny Raw always says, and how are you going to feel on the other side of that bite, right? And whatever food you've given into, how is it going to serve you on the other side of that bite, on the other side of that meal? And if you don't know Tanny Raw, she's on every social media platform for health, and you can find her. She's amazing. But yeah, like sometimes she'll come into my mind where I'll just go, oh, pause and think about it. How are you going to feel on the other side of this meal? How are you going to feel? Most likely shamed, depressed, bummed, disheartened, certainly not content, because it's nonsense food that does nothing for my body, right? So in a tempting moment, this typically looks like pressing the enticing impression into the clarity of truth. What precisely is being promised to us? Is it really going to be that delicious, or will the chemicals just taste like chemicals? What does God have to say about gluttony, right? And who do you wish to trust and why? Yeah, the advertisers who only want to make a buck? I mean, let's be fair. That's when you think about it. When you go through all of the aisles in the grocery store, all of those things are prepackaged and have a million ingredients and a fun, label and a lot of buzzwords about delicious, exciting, flavorful, mouth-watering, like all those things. Then you get into the fruit and vegetable aisle, and it's no wrappers and just at best a little sticker for them to scan for the price. Because those things are self-advertised and sponsored by God, right? Okay, so this is essentially how Jesus resisted the tempting mirage moments Satan placed before him in the wilderness. Here's the point. So the old bottom line, which I live for. The devil doesn't want us to think clearly in the moment of temptation. You think? He wants to deceive us with appealing, vague pictures and compelling, vague promises and obscure the destructive consequences of sin behind a pleasurable impression of happiness. We must not believe this impression. We must not buy on impulse. Kill temptation with honest questions as much as you can, and flee if you must. Oh, isn't that so brilliant? Kill temptation with honest questions as much as you can, and flee if you must. Wow. What a fantastic article. Was I right when I said I have another fantastic article? This one is worth reviewing, my friends. There is a lot of really good stuff in here. Wow, wow, wow. The devil is not an artist, but a vandal. He doesn't create, he distorts, disfigures, and disfaces what God makes. Amen. So true. When applied to temptation, diabolical impressionism becomes a powerful and terrible tool. The devil doesn't employ realism when painting a temptation because there's no truth in him. So true. Marketing itself is, of course, not evil. However, we live in an age of sophisticated marketing, a fair amount of which is manipulative and misleading. And this is precisely what the devil does, and no one is more effective a manipulative marketer than him. In this sense, the power is in the deceptive impression the temptation has on us. The devil doesn't want us to ask too many questions about the actual sin product and whether it can or ever has delivered the happiness it promises. He just wants the impression that it will deliver in order to tap into our influential, sinful desires and to encourage us to be impulse buyers. Oh my gosh. I mean, you can tell by my sweet little calendar that I've done very well, in these 2 weeks. But I faltered today, and it's for these many reasons. And I'm so happy to read this article. All right, my friends, like if you like, join us if you haven't, subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what you could relate to. Wow. And of course, I've just put this in the description of the video. Know that I prayed for you, and until we talk again, know that you're blessed.